Water and sewer projects in this bond issue amount to $32 million. We have $42 million in the Water and Sewer Reserve Fund. At the end of this year, it's projected to be close to $44 million. Why can't some of these bond projects be funded from the reserve? Why do we go out and incur more debt when we have a reserve fund of $42 million?
So first of all, I want to say that the water and sewage Proposition 1, is, in my opinion, I think 1 and 3 are both flying under the radar because everybody's focusing on public safety. But the water and sewage proposition really has a big impact on Shreveport citizens. So Shreveport has a first-class fire rating, Class 1 fire rating.
Sure.
That has a significant impact on your home and business insurance. 40% of that is calculated by our water infrastructure. If we allow our water infrastructure to go into disrepair, then you're going to fill that in your pocketbook.
You haven't answered my question. Why can't
the
we use a
reason
reserve?
answer to your question about the reserves is Shreveport Water and Sewer Department they are required to have 90 days operating cost in their reserve
What's
fund.
that amount?
Amounts to about a little over 50% of the amount that's in there currently.
The dollar amount?
Yes. The rest of that money
What is the dollar amount?
$42 million. And so $24 million is roughly the 90-day operating cost. And the rest of the money in the reserve fund has to be there to cover emergency repairs to things like water mains and lift stations, which cost
I've
millions.
looked at other cities' water and sewer reserve funds, and they're not nearly this high. Who requires that?
What other cities?
Lafayette and Baton Rouge, and they don't have nearly this amount in reserve.
I don't know why they don't have that.
Well, who's requiring us to have that amount?
Well, I mean, you remember back when we were talking about reserve funds earlier in the year, we were talking about they need to have 90 days operating cost in a reserve fund. That's a city policy.
Okay, it's a city policy. We could change that. And we could use
it
some of
wouldn't
that.
be prudent to change that when we're talking about changing an enterprise fund that supplies the entire city with water.
Well,
they need to have 90 days operating costs to make sure that if something were to happen, you would be able to have access to clean drinking water.
Well, we also should have a more of a reserve in our general fund as well, which we don't. So we obviously violate that.
That's something that the mayor, the mayor came and talked to you all about that many times. I've come and talked about that many times. We both agree.
Okay. Previous bond projects that have not been done or are in the works. You know, I go back to Cross Bayou. Where's our park that we were promised in '96? And I also want to ask you, will any of these bond projects have anything to do with the new Cross Bayou
So let's
proposal?
deal with that question first on its own, just separated from everything else. The answer to your question without mixing words or anything. No.
Nothing will be part of. Nobody's come to you from the Cross Bayou project, folks, and said, "Hey, let's put the new police station down there. Let's put the new city courts down there." Nothing is planned for that.
There's not been one word mentioned of Cross Bayou.
Okay.
Cross Bayou. Now, as far as this Cross Bayou Park extension that you're talking about, so every dime of that money has been used to acquire land along that Cross Bayou area.
Said we still have that money.
We still have some of it. Some of it has not. Some of it has not been spent. There is a balance in the account, but like that land was, the proposition was for a River Park extension, and that land was used to acquire. That money has been used to acquire land, which includes the land that the convention center now sits on.
Okay. But we still have some of that money from that bond issue. From a 96 bond issue, we still have money left over. Don't you see a problem with that?
Well, I also see that being an example of what that pertains to the previous question you asked me. We're not going to spend this money on anything that does not pertain to the proposition.
Okay. The 2011 bond issue. In the mayor's package, he says 86% of the projects are complete, and that number will be up to 94% by the end of the year. Why does it take so freaking long?
It doesn't. If you look at the 2011 bond, that was a $175 million bond. But the average length of time to execute in full a $175 million bond is somewhere between 7 and 10 years. If you look, for example, at Pompano Beach, Florida, who recently put out a $175 million bond, when they went to the citizens with it, they told them it will take about 8 years to fully execute that. We're in the 8th year of that bond. And we expect by the end of the 8th year of that bond to be at 94%. Now, there are large projects like the one that you like to talk about, large construction projects like the one you like to talk about on Knight Street. Mm-hmm. It's inevitable that from time to time, large construction projects are going to bump into complications that could be caused by weather or any number of different factors. In the case of Knight Street, what happened was they ran into a utility conflict. There was a water main in the way. So they went back to the drawing board. They were looking at it. And in that process, determined that they either have to treat the soil or they're going to have to use more concrete. They're now ready to move forward with that project. They will be at council this week asking for the funds for Knight Street to be approved, the additional funds.
Woohoo!
The addition, yeah, got a woohoo out of Aaron.
Yeah, now her driveway is going to be blocked for a year and a half. That'll be awesome. Tell you what, are
thank
you
you.
done? Do you want you ask Mr. Bendis?
We have to talk about debt, which we haven't gotten to
Can you
yet.